Today marks the 250th anniversary of one of the greatest experiments the world has ever seen. How that experiment ultimately concludes is still being written. At its core, a group of thoughtful, well-read, traveled, and deeply curious men gathered around a question that was both philosophical and practical. Can people govern themselves? That question is what sat underneath the countless conversations, debates, and disagreements as they worked to design a republic they hoped would stand the test of time. In that moment, they knew they weren't simply responding to the circumstances of their day. They were attempting to build something that future generations would inherit. I've found myself thinking about that this week. Not simply because today is the 4th of July, but because I wonder if every generation eventually arrives at its own defining question. A moment where the world changes just enough that the assumptions of the previous generation no longer seem sufficient. It feels to me as though we've quietly arrived at one of those moments ourselves. But before we go any further, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and share thoughts on how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change. If you find any value in this video, like it, share your comments below, and subscribe. As I was writing this newsletter, I found myself wondering what the Founding Fathers would think if they could spend a single afternoon in 2026. Would Franklin marvel at how instantly information now moves around the globe? Would Hamilton become fascinated with cryptocurrency and modern financial systems? Would Jefferson lose himself experimenting with large language models? Would Adams raise concerns about surveillance and privacy? Would Washington still remind us that character ultimately matters more than technology? Obviously, I don't actually know what they would think, but I do believe it is safe to say one thing about these men. These were deeply curious people. They were thinkers and tinkerers, builders and experimenters, students of architecture, literature, philosophy, religion, history, and human nature. They weren't afraid of new ideas. In fact, they actively sought them out. My suspicion is they would not spend much time arguing about artificial intelligence from the sidelines. They would be adopting it, learning it, testing it, debating it, and pushing it to understand both its promise, its risks, and its limits. That curiosity is what I keep coming back to. This week, I was also reflecting on Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence. From June 11th through June 28th, Jefferson sat in a small rented room in Philadelphia and drafted what would become one of the most consequential documents in history. When you actually think about Jefferson's writing experience, it is almost impossible not to imagine how different that process would look today. The quill pen would almost certainly be replaced by a keyboard. Historical references could be retrieved in seconds instead of days. Drafts could be reorganized and shared almost instantly. Perhaps he would even have an AI assistant sitting alongside him, challenging assumptions, refining language, or helping him explore alternative ways to communicate an idea. I don't think using AI would somehow diminish Jefferson's accomplishment. If anything, I suspect he would have viewed it the same way every great thinker has viewed a new tool, as something that extends our ability to think more deeply, test more ideas, and communicate more clearly. But the part I find even more fascinating is everything that happened after he completed writing the document. Within days, 56 delegates aligned around the document strongly enough to place their names beneath it. Think about that for a moment. How long would it take 56 people inside your organization to align around a single document? Not simply to approve it, but to believe in it strongly enough to put their reputation behind it? Leadership is often associated with generating better ideas, but history suggests its greater challenge has always been generating shared conviction. As I thought about all of this, I found myself wrestling with a different question. What if we have framed this technological moment incorrectly? For the last several years, we've called it artificial intelligence. But what if from the very beginning we had called it expanded intelligence instead? I can't help but wonder if those two framings lead us to two entirely different emotional responses. Artificial intelligence instinctively sounds external, something separate from us, something we are competing with and have to defend ourselves against. Expanded intelligence tells a very different story. It suggests that our capacity has grown, that our ability to think, create, build, connect ideas, solve problems, and make sense of complexity has expanded in ways that were previously unimaginable. It seems that is what is actually happening. Every major technological breakthrough has expanded some aspect of human capability. The steam engine expanded strength, shortened distances, and created standard time. The automobile expanded movement, enhanced agency, and created new markets. The internet expanded our access to information, broadened our reach, and created faster forms of communication. This moment is different because it expands intelligence itself. And let's be clear, that does not diminish human intelligence. It extends it. The more I think about it, the more I wonder whether that subtle shift in language might actually explain something I've been writing about over the last several months. One of the things I've found most interesting over the last year is watching leadership teams react to AI in real time. Two executives can sit through the same presentation. They hear the same examples, see the same research, and the same list of opportunities. One leaves the room asking, "How quickly can we begin experimenting?" The other leaves asking, "How do we make sure this doesn't create unnecessary risk?" Neither person is irrational or wrong. They're simply experiencing the same moment differently. For some people, AI primarily represents loss, threat, and uncertainty. Loss of jobs, threat of relevance, increases in uncertainty. It feels scary for some before they ever begin using it. For others, it represents possibility, a chance to build faster, learn faster, solve problems differently, and create things that previously felt impossible. I've started wondering whether those two narratives have less to do with artificial intelligence itself than with the state from which we experience it. When our nervous system feels safe, uncertainty often registers as possibility. We become curious, open, and exploratory. With that, we ask better questions. When our nervous system feels threatened, the very same uncertainty can register as danger. We narrow our focus on risk. We tend to protect or defend what we think we know. Our skepticism is higher than our curiosity. Maybe the technology isn't creating two different stories, but instead it is revealing two different nervous system responses to the same moment. What we are really observing then isn't a disagreement about technology, but instead we are observing two different ways of perceiving what this moment means. Artificial intelligence may be the technology, but expanded intelligence is the mindset you need. Of course, simply reframing AI as expanded intelligence doesn't eliminate uncertainty. Change is still accelerating, and with it comes greater uncertainty. And our brains evolved to crave prediction. When prediction breaks down, fear naturally fills the gap. That isn't weakness. It's simply how we evolved. Which is why I continue coming back to something that has become a recurring theme throughout my research, my writing, my work with clients, and ultimately this newsletter. I don't think the defining leadership capability of the next decade will simply be understanding and implementing artificial intelligence. I believe it will be helping ourselves and those around us remain regulated enough to engage with it thoughtfully. By nature, though, curiosity can be difficult to access when our nervous system is consumed by fear, which means the leader's first job in a moment of fear isn't to calm the room, it's to calm themselves. One of my favorite leadership stories illustrates this beautifully. In 1783, as the Revolutionary War was drawing to a close, many of George Washington's officers were growing increasingly frustrated. Congress had failed to provide the pay they had been promised. The young nation simply did not have the money. As uncertainty and resentment grew, the rumblings of mutiny began spreading through the camp. Washington sensed this and gathered the officers together to address them. As he began reading his prepared remarks, known as the Newburgh Address, he paused, calmly reached into his pocket, and removed a pair of spectacles. His officers had never seen him wear them before. For a military commander of Washington's stature, openly revealing that kind of vulnerability was almost unheard of. Looking out across the group, he quietly said, "Gentlemen, you must pardon me, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my country. History tells us many of the officers were moved to tears. In one sentence, with one vulnerable action, the mutiny dissolved. I've always loved that story because Washington didn't regulate the room through his authority. He regulated it through honesty and authenticity. His presence changed the emotional state of everyone listening before his argument ever had the chance to persuade them. As we celebrate the 250th anniversary of this remarkable experiment, I find myself wondering if our generation has inherited its own defining question. Not just whether people can still govern themselves, but whether we can govern ourselves in an age where intelligence itself has expanded. Technology will continue expanding what is possible. If you are following along, that seems inevitable. The more important question is whether we will expand our capacity for uncertainty and change alongside it. Will we become more curious than fearful, more thoughtful than reactive, more courageous than comfortable? I suspect these questions may shape the next 250 years every bit as much as the one our founding fathers wrestled with all those years ago. If you want to explore how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change, my new book, The Missing Link, offers a new lens. It shows why most change efforts stall and how human capacity, not just strategy, determines success. Once you see it, you'll lead change very differently. You can access it for free right now. Link is below the video.